So welcome. I'm glad you're all here. The agenda is really looking at the report and then taking the next steps. Are there any additions to the agenda? And we're also going to talk about meetings with council members. Any additional comments to the agenda? Minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, motion, make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any objection? Oh, we lost Anne. Can we
I
continue?
think she was trying to second it.
Oh, I'm here. I just again, I'm in the process of the move, so I'll keep my
Okay.
video off.
Okay. Are there any citizen comments? Citizens on board? No. I just as a point of personal privilege, I said this to people who were here before, as I thought maybe we would be done tonight. And I was anxious about that. And then when I realized we weren't going to be done, I got quite relaxed. So I thought we are where we are, and we'll see what the next steps are. But if you're like me, there's a certain eagerness to be done with this project and move on to something else, something that's surely more fun. I thought what we do is just get some reports. Who are we missing? Tracy and
Dana.
Matt.
Tamara.
Okay.
I think Matt and Tamara were prior back to back with something else that might have ended around 5, so they might both. That works, but it's from home a lot,
Yeah.
right? So maybe it's just a matter of signing on.
Okay. All right. So we'll just go ahead. And what I want to say is that although my dreams of having this project totally finished today didn't come true, we made an enormous amount of progress, I think, this week. This month, we sort of had a consistent conversations about what things should be and how we ought to proceed. And as always, I really want to thank you for the work that you all have done on this project. Move forward. So I thought, since it was you and Dana who were going to talk about this first section, I guess it's you.
Can we show it?
Yep.
On the screen? Can I do it from your computer?
Yes. Share. Share.
Brian is in 2 for this, like a mute and no volume on.
So mute and no volume?
Yeah.
I gotta mute my volume?
Yeah.
Or mute my mute?
It's the Zoom mute and your computer.
Get rid of a few things here. Does the city have a style guide
For citation.
you lost it.
No, like one.
Like, do you capitalize city all the time, or do you?
Oh,
Um,
I can get you that. Yeah.
I'm sharing the screen, but I don't know where it is. Is this it? Let me see.
Is it that one?
Yeah, okay, well. No,
There, it's up there.
no, it's the 6th one. Okay, I'm gonna start again. Share screen. You can go all the
It's
way
not on
back
your
to the
screen.
faster than this, yeah. File. New window. Perhaps. Google Docs.
That's nice.
Over here, right?
I don't know how your stuff is organized. To go to your, oh, hold on.
I got it to only Google. Here we are, only Google.
Oh,
Docs.
okay, there, in November. I'm gonna share. It's not on share.
Here,
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
thank you. Okay,
Okay, now there's the thing over here. Oh, there, okay. So one of the things, I don't know where to start. If you look at the document, you'll see that there's 3 sections now. There's section 1, context. There's section 2, which is strategies and actions. And section 4, which should say section 3, which is appendices. Anyway, we divided it up kind of like the same in a way that Shoreline divides it. So context for the climate stuff, and then the middle section is strategies and actions. Just as a way to organize how we're thinking about it. So that's one thing that we did. And then the context section was what Dana and I and Sarah were working on. And so it's been rearranged a bit. And it starts with impacts now. I can get there. So this is ready to be read. And I guess read it with the understanding that this is how we're opening the document, the main part of the document. Yeah. So it's impacts and Puget Sound. It's to appeal to the reader that these impacts are affecting us. It's much like what it was before, only some of the graphs and stuff and links go to primary links instead of some of what it was before. I wasn't sure, I wasn't very good at figure captions for figures, so it's stuck on the side. So somebody who's brilliant at Google Docs can help, or we can move it somewhere else. Anyway, so it's the same impacts over there before, written a little differently, with directly speaking to Lake Forest Park. So hitting up right up front. So you can read that at your leisure. So these graphs actually came from this climate mapping for resilient in Washington. And so I figured out why one of these graphs is for the high scenario 8.5 and one was for 4.5, because you can't do them both. You can't do everything with this tool. You can only do 8.5. So that's the reason. And I point this out in the text because I read it and I said, well, why is one graph the low emissions profile, one's the high? Anyway, that's why. So it tried to remove redundancy and stuff like that. So we end up with wildfire severity. And I was pretty excited to find this graph from the Puget Sound Clean Air Energy.
Okay.
That shows the last 5 years is as much of the data that they have available on the website. I imagine if we really wanted more data, we could ask them for data. So the red, of course, is the unhealthy air. So it shows, and then the months are on the bottom. There's different ways of plotting this, but this was what I stuck up here. It's 2.5 parts per million. So I try to explain, like for heat, I explained that the heat index that they use is based on temperature and humidity and word it in a way that I think that people can understand and relate to.
It would be nice to have that go back. Just show more than 5 years.
You can't, not from the tool. You could probably send them a request for data because I'm sure they have it.
So did you graph that?
No, it's there. You can ask it to graph it in different way, so either days, months, or yeah. So I just say give me as much as you have. So anyway, that's there, and you can somebody can play with that. Where's my little person?
Oh, it's frozen.
Oh, okay, that is. Oh.
Oh, and my computer is gone.
That's why. I'm sorry. I broke your computer. Okay, here we go.
Okay,
Wait, everybody disappeared.
Yeah, what happened? What happened to our people?
Everybody just have their camera off besides that, that's why.
Hi, Matt.
And it's still there.
Hello.
There
Camera's in the car.
So maybe.
You don't drive and text or watch at the same time.
I'm a passenger.
I'm sorry, my computer just went down, so, and Mimi was using my computer, so we're rebooting everything. Your program.
Okay, I think I'm on one.
Okay, there.
Okay. Just mute your Zoom and your laptop. There, okay. Okay, this is much. So let me. Okay, so that's what the impacts. So then. The ideas are there, they're just written a little differently than we were before. So then we decided that the underlying stuff with what is climate change can just be a box of information that we stick somewhere. It's kind of separate. And so that's what we did. And it's stuck right here, but it doesn't have to be there. It's just a general background. So anybody who's really familiar with it won't read it. But for somebody who's curious, they might read it. So you take a look and see what you think of it. So then I'm gonna let Dana talk. Yeah. Why we need a climate action plan, because I was the impacts part, and then this was Dana's still working on it. She's still working on it.
Dana should be working on it and Dana has. Yeah, sorry.
Do you want to say something, or should I just skip? Let's just go through it.
Actually, before we go on.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Do we
Yes.
have a graph? I think one of the most interesting graphs, something that really is impactful to students is that most kids today are living in a world where they've never seen a year that hasn't been warmer than average. Right? And it's kind of cool to see that in a graph. Do you have anything like that?
You mean the temperature profile
temperature, yeah.
over time? We can stick that in what is climate change.
Yeah,
That's where it fits.
Good
I like that one. It's
Yeah.
pretty impactful when kids,
Okay.
especially young kids like 20-year-old realizes
Yeah.
all the years that they've been born, all the years that have all been warmer than average.
Do you have that chart
I
somewhere?
do somewhat. Yeah.
Oh, someone, can you send it?
Right now.
Well,
I'm
no,
just
tonight.
I'm putting a placeholder in there.
Okay,
It's nice to have a figure in there too, I was thinking. That box.
Okay, so I stuck a note in that we should have that. But one of the things in there that I realized was a good point was that this assumption that everything's built on a stable climate. The history of we've lived our lives in a stable climate, and you can't assume that's true anymore. I think that's kind of a jolt you into reality kind of statement. So I like that one. So
I thought that was very.
So I think that first part, it should be pretty readable. There's probably details that need to be changed, but then we go into why we need a climate action plan. And this is much as it was before, it's just moved into the middle here. So then we've got reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Under that is the emissions profile. That's the same stuff that was there before.
So I got a new figure for that, that's the one.
Oh, this one is a little different. Is this one you're saying is different?
This one I changed, so I made it into one that's more pictorial, and maybe I should just stick that in right now. While we're talking.
Okay.
And you can see, so what I thought about this was that. It's not saying that much and it looks like it. but Sarah took some pictures for me. And I do have something that I put together. A little different.
Okay. So. So that was the emissions profile, then emissions targets is this familiar document or graph that is explained and referenced in here. So Dana's still working on these sections.
Yeah, so that graph, I've changed it quite a bit from the original, but it's still kind of complicated. It's got all that text on the right hand side. I don't know if people have suggestions for making that.
Yeah, it's all the things other people are gonna do, right? The brown,
The brown is red, like government
Yeah.
regulation. And so it's all the things that are going through state Congress and above. And then the green is where I was trying to make the point that that is where we can make a difference as a community or, you know, on the city level. So without doing that green stuff as a city, we are gonna remain at that higher level.
and I think what's important about this diagram is everybody in the county is using it. So I think they call it the wedge diagram and it just seems to be in every document, so I think we have to keep it in ours. I appreciate the simplification though, because sometimes it had so many different colors and lines you could hardly follow it.
You don't need that.
But you do begin to see that you don't have to do everything, but you have to do your part, sort of, right?
Yeah, I half my sleep, but the EW Sustainability gave a talk, the presentation today on their greenhouse gas inventory and plan, their sustainability plan. They use this figure, but in a very different way. I mean, the same kind of lines, but they put their own goals in there. Saying that this was how we're gonna, so it was kind of interesting, but I was falling asleep.
Well, if you zoom in on the part with the right side, or the red on the right, at the bottom, the red text. So that is us. And so those things that are listed there, I can't remember exactly what they are, but that was, that's things like the built environment,
It's a good word,
transportation, it's those things that we're trying to reduce. So that's kind of like maybe they were, these are our goals.
Yeah, it was very simplified, so I was gonna, it'll be available, and so then I can,
Yeah,
to hijack it, but it was much simpler. There were very few words.
yeah, well, we could take out those words in the brown and just say, since big government, this is power. The green is us, and the red is what's being done, but.
You just wanna like specify LFP local, just.
but it's every city doing, I mean, every city has to, owns that block, right?
Yeah, so the data, so they've got numbers and stuff on it, so it's not, those numbers don't apply to LFP.
I didn't know if it
It's a broader, yeah.
Yeah, we should look at what EW did and then see how,
Yeah, maybe we
Might
can
give
put
I-
our own numbers.
ideas as to how to
That'd be awesome.
adapt this. And also, I believe it's Cascadia Consulting, again, same company that,
Same guy,
did you
Bruce?
stuff. So, and then there's the path forward, I put my path forward there. Well, where to go? That's that new section, that's the new section. And I dig with it a little bit. Did you stick your figure there?
I did, I stuck it up above the, and it's kind of rough. It gives you the idea, but it's like,
So where does it come from?
so it's saying the same kind of information as down below. These are photos that, well, many of them are ones that Sarah sent me, and then I found a couple others. I have a screenshot in there, which is very. So 7% is just from refrigerators. Not
Refrigeration.
refrigeration. So I could put in an air conditioner instead of a refrigerator. So this is the escape of. I fluorocarbons or whatever it is, they're also greenhouse gases.
And they just changed the regulations for those too. That goes into effect soon, that reduces whatever it is that's escaping and replaces it with something that's just as effective.
Can I ask a question? If, I don't know if anybody's going to be asking this, but, in the presentation, I was sleeping through today. A significant amount of it, so transportation was not as big a wedge as you would expect for UW. Because they had added this new thing, which is, goods and services. So they've calculated the emissions that they can attribute to goods and services, which is all the paper you buy, all that kind of stuff. And that was like over 50%.
I wonder if goods and services included some of that transportation, though, like bringing stuff in.
Right, that's the question, and so we need to be clear about how,
They might have just said,
Well,
this is our transportation, yeah.
right, and so that's a different
That's a
way,
different way of
and,
doing it.
but just so we know what we're doing compared to some, because if somebody
Right.
asks. then-
When we got this emissions study, they did talk about two different ways of looking at this data, and one
Okay,
included
so that-
all of this stuff that you were talking about.
Okay,
I didn't, and they landed on this way as of reporting it to the cities. But we could go back and look at
It
that.
doesn't even.
like our groceries, where that doesn't
Right.
fit in there
No,
at
it
all.
doesn't.
Right,
Right, but
That-
That would be part of
Just put 'em
transportation.
in
Well,
the
if we look
refrigerator.
at the other or the other figure though, the circle. So transportation is broken down to on-road vehicles, off-road equipment, and air transport. So living like UW's transportation is fairly low because if most people are.
it was commuting was on there, and so that was low, yeah.
But we don't really have in that figure. any- Well, maybe buildings and energy would explain. For using paper wise or
Well,
whatever.
I think this,
to use
whoever
with-
created this in the first place can probably answer that question, but it's just something we probably wanna be able to answer
Conversion,
if we're talking about this.
So that was in that report.
It is, and I don't recall the data well enough, but there was one, it had to do with, one was consumption based and one was
Right, I remember you talking about this in the
something,
beginning,
another
yeah.
kind of base. And this is, for consistency, we were using these throughout the report. They just, they laid out both of them and then said that we're gonna use this one for.
Well, if we figure that out, we might want to add that as transportation,
Include,
good and goods and services.
If it's the other thing that's not in this figure is the land use.
It's building and some land use.
Oh, is it?
I mean.
buildings and
I thought it was
energy there,
buildings and energy.
that's. Right, so depending on how you categorize things,
yep.
different
Yeah.
things get parsed
Different
differently.
ways, exactly,
Um,
but I thought it
So
was.
anyway, we just wanna know what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
Yeah, oh, really? Yeah.
Okay. So, let's see, that was. Oh, this is, okay. Then we went to Sarah's part. Okay, wait, this was the last section of Dana's part, which is our path forward. Mitigating and developing resilience. So, Dana's still working on that. And then we described the committee, so Sarah did some of this. It's a description of the process. And plan development, here's our beautiful timeline. And is this gonna replace the other one? Okay, it's gonna, oh, it's gone, the other one's gone, okay. Excellent, what's going on?
Because I understood this one, because I wrote
Right,
it.
right,
And I thought, the audience is the council's seen this, let's show it to them. Yeah. That was my thinking.
okay, right.
And and there was some narrative underneath it.
And so this is a list of some of the
Yeah.
stuff that we've done and that I added. My little idea here, so I don't lose track. Our next book.
Book, yes,
club.
I was very excited about that.
Dear Human and the Edge of Time came out with the National Climate Assessment this year. conjunction, so I.
What is it by?
It's a
Oh,
anthology. Anyway. So those are all the things we did. And then this is the section that, did you guys look at this? I had redone,
I saw that you had written a note and tagged me.
and so this describes, which I really appreciated that Lake Forest Park was originally a nature retreat. That actually is pretty strong statement, you know, because that's what it sort of points to our values, really. So I tried to follow that idea through the legacy vision.
Who said that it wasn't, is that in the legacy?
Here it says it was originally platted in 1910 with residents intended as nature retreats for professionals and midwives.
I wonder.
The brochure selling the lot said that.
So nature retreat didn't mean like vacation, no.
Yeah,
they
So
can't.
not necessarily that they're.
Well, they were getting away from the city, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, whatever
Right.
that, we want that to mean, it like sounds good.
But if that's a quote, maybe we should put it in quotes,
We can
Well,
talk to Sarah about that.
intended as a nature retreat,
Um,
that part of the book.
So we can find it.
It's okay. So then it carries through, the values are part of our comprehensive plan, and then the quote is there from that. And then this idea that if we're gonna respond, we need to come together as a community. I keep sticking this in there. And that the community needs to be part of the decision-making process. So this is leading into the survey that we did. And this is something that I went after because I was tagged with saying something about why it's important that the community be part of it. And I started seeing a lot more about that in that there's something I read today or something that if people around you are doing something, you're more likely to do it too. You probably saw something. I mean, it's a common, but depending on how somebody talks about it, it makes more sense. And so
There's this thing about tipping points too. If you get to a certain point where people are all doing something, then you tip over into having a big group.
yeah, but those go together. But so I don't have that. But so I just grabbed this quote and a reference.
Okay.
And the word equitable is in there, so that's good. So then I point to the fact that the Lake Forest Park Climate Action Committee is a commitment on the part of the city already to transform and accelerate action on climate. Like, it's kudos to the city who's sort of doing this.
Yep.
And then I go on to say something about the results of the survey that we did that connect the community to this committee and thus to the city. Oh, yeah. Oops.
The city also joined that K4C early on, which was a
That's
pretty big.
somewhere that said,
Yeah.
somewhere else, yeah. So then this is a brief statement about the survey. Took out a bunch of the graphs because I was like, so see if this is okay. And then just some of the key findings from the survey are here. And I just called out, 5 different, I think this is what was here before, only stated a little bit differently and organized a little differently. Yeah. And then this is gonna launch into strategies and action.
So what do you, let me just pull the curtain for a minute and say, what is the best way to read this now? And if you have some comments on it, do we put them as comments in the back? Notes, or we just edit it?
I like the idea of comments. That seemed to be helpful when we were doing our part, at least.
I think comments now would be
Okay.
appropriate.
Okay,
Yeah.
rather fixed
Rather
typo.
than changing.
Yeah.
People have worked pretty hard on their end.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Strategies and actions, Brian, you're up.
You wanna share your screen? Or
Yes, please, can I?
You know, I bet Ian could explain the difference between the consumption and.
All those two models.
Yeah.
Okay, so, one of the first things that we kind of ran into trouble with, not ran into trouble, should I say trouble?
Now my trouble, they're gonna have trouble.
Well, we noticed, so, when we look at our climate action plan, of course, we have in our strategies, and so we have six focus groups. Am I not sharing?
Am I still
Oh,
sharing?
yeah, yeah, okay. So we have these six focus groups, as you can see on the far left. And the one that kind of sticks out to me is a section on what the municipality should be doing. If you look at all the other actions, like Kenmore's action plan, they've only got 5, they don't have municipalities. If you look at shoreline. No, actually, Kenmore does have a municipality, they just don't have it as one of their focus groups, they have it at the very beginning. I can not make people sick and scroll down really quick. So they have a very beginning, and all what this is saying is, hey, those 5 focus groups, you guys are supposed to really be overseeing, which is really what the city should be doing. So do we really need a separate municipality section? Shoreline doesn't have one, Kenmore doesn't have one. All what they did was take all these municipality things that we put into our section and they've integrated into the 5 focus groups. Now, the reason why I was in favor of doing it the way that Kenmore and Shoreline have done it is because I didn't want the city to just look at their section and say, oh, this is all we have to do, because they have to do everything, right? Nothing really is going to get done without the city going through all 5 focus groups. So I guess that's one big question we need to answer before we really.
Can I ask you what, so this says municipal operations, strategies and actions, and then strategy. So this
So this
is,
is Kenmore's, yeah.
so they've created a table of
They've
things
got a,
that they should do. as
right,
a
but
city.
all this is doing is reduce emissions for buildings. So they have their buildings and energy, they have their transportation. Right, so this is just saying their 5 focus groups are here. You gotta be in charge of making sure that these 5 focus groups here get done.
Okay, I see. Yeah. I remember there's a lot of overlap too. right?
There is a lot of overlap, because we mention a lot of municipality stuff in our 5 focus groups, and then we kind of reinvigorate them in our own municipality section.
So in Kenmore, they have these community priorities spelled out as strategies and actions, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And then shoreline, here's shoreline up here. The shoreline, there's shoreline, and again, they have the transportation, yes, basically transportation. There's their 5. There again, so they don't have a
Can
separate.
you make it bigger? Possible to make it bigger?
Can you just, there on the bottom right hand side is a magnifying glass.
If you close out the Welcome to Acrobat section, that'll help. On the left, there's an X by Welcome to Acrobat. You can close that and that starts.
There we go. So these are just their 5 focus groups here. Right?
Okay.
So this is exactly what we have. Except that, again, we have a separate focus group for municipality.
This is their overall table, right? And they have an implementation thing that has a bunch of details.
Yeah, exactly. They have basically what we have here, which is here's our transportation, and they have the exact kind of same thing. Yeah. With all the details of how we do. So I guess that's one of the things that we really should think about, is whether or not we want to just take our municipality's separate section and just integrate it. Or I could do that, just integrate it into those other 5 sections.
They've just gone back and forth on this. Bunch of things.
Yeah, I certainly see the value in just integrating it.
You do or you don't?
I do.
And as I said, it then. Again, none of these focus groups are gonna get done without the city. They have to be involved in all of them, so. I guess integrating them into it and just making explicit that they're involved in all 5 of these is really.
I think
pretty
your point that they would just look at their little table. And
Yeah,
not the rest
sure.
is very compelling argument.
It is, well, I can see city government or. anyways, that's just my thought, and I'm happy to do it. But basically what Sarah and I, two Sarah's and Linda, and then we basically just tightened these things up a little bit. We made them a much more, like the actions were all action words like electrify, increase, and integrate. So those are the more of the actions, and then of course we've got, you know, the how to accomplish those. And we basically take everybody's input from they had, and we kind of tried to tighten those up a little bit. We tried to make them a little bit more direct. So yeah, I think you guys should probably read through those just to make sure they cover all the ground. We added a few things like the Miyawaki Forest. We want to increase those. Sarah really got on her bike thing and really put that in everywhere. We're gonna have a bike station in pretty much every part of the city, which is great.
So I can ride, you know,
Yeah.
old people, we have to rest a lot.
So it's all again, things that we should probably just go through, that we're really happy with the way that we've got the action things set up.
Our notion was that the actions were like chapter titles.
Yeah.
So they were,
So what about the things that the city needs to do that aren't? Like that the city needs to write grants and support.
Those are in there. We've got,
Oh,
you know,
for
light
each of the
grants,
subjects.
separate ones, Whenever we beg for money, we basically say, hey, here's an option to find a grant. But Sarah, is there anything else you want me to cover on that?
well, we need to tighten up the, is Tamara still on?
Yeah.
Tamara? We were gonna, in these focus areas, we were hoping that did you work on this community priorities section?
I started it.
Okay.
At the bottom.
Oh, I highlighted it on mine. In each section, there's goals,
Oh, right, that's right.
community priorities.
And there's these community priorities.
Yeah. So can you talk about what you were thinking?
Because these are basically what Tamara wants to take some of the surveys responses and put them in as community priorities,
Yeah.
sort of at the end of each section where they kind of go to within the section. So
Yeah, and so that's why I was looking for trying to get some of the raw data for that.
I don't have access to it.
You don't have access to it?
You don't have access to it.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Raw data?
I can give you everything that I have.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I found all of your like summaries that you created, Mimi.
For
Which are
like
great.
the appendix, or.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
there's-
think like that you had created for the like the city council and some of those other like summaries.
But the underlying information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that all here. I can share it all with you.
Okay, great.
I think would be compelling to have a quote from the survey there that says, you know, I'd ride my bike more if only they were charging, so, yeah.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
people would do this if they put themselves.
Well, that people make comments, there were a very rich set of comments, so that was hoping that we could just pull a quote that captured, I don't know, is that too much?
Yeah.
That's what I had in mind, but I.
So is that was another question, like, do you want, yeah, like just to pull direct quotes or more of a, like a summary?
Yeah, like data, I put like data showing like, 25% of people would do this.
You could do a combination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
I mean-
even, we have, so.
Yeah.
Because we kind of have like this survey like summaried in a different section.
Then, like then council will see like, oh, well, 75% of people would use
I think that's a good
like
idea.
smaller if there's
Mhm.
other sidewalks or whatever.
Well, that's what we actually took out. We had some graphs in there. And the moving up on mine is if it makes a difference, so that we have these, the findings of the climate action, those 1 through 5. Can you move yours up a little
I could move mine.
to page 26?
It's the survey, if you click on the survey. But there it is. Those are the big overview key findings.
You want me to click on it?
No.
No,
That's,
sorry.
I think we, Matt, did we dump all the data? No, you have the raw data on the survey, right?
Yes,
Okay,
I have the stuff from the survey
I can
tool itself,
resend.
and then we have all the stuff we on those days where we all got
Yeah.
together and put, so I have those
Yeah, you guys.
too.
okay. So,
So you're thinking like do like a summary of like it with data, like 75% of people, residents say they would, bike instead of drive.
You could refer to the table that's in, or the any figure that's in the appendix, so you could say appendix Z table 2 or something. That is your reference for the statement, so that you don't have to put the figure in there.
Okay,
And you don't need to pull all the data out, just a few key things.
Yeah, just the key ones for that. I think that's especially pertinent to that particular strategy and action, like for transportation, or buildings.
That's what I meant, like.
and then maybe a key quote as well.
if you find them, they're juicy because we can put them in a little box, a full quote box, and then it's what people have said to us, which is sort of more interesting than what, more interesting.
It's kind of like
Mhm.
here,
Yeah, to just,
something very readable.
Yeah.
put it in
You can even make
large.
it fuzzy by saying like Joe, a Lake Forest Park resident.
Yeah.
Mhm.
or we could say Sarah, and then I could write whatever I wanted. Yeah, I took that survey.
Right? You're like, it's interesting. All these quotes come from the Climate Action Committee members.
Yes.
And they're all about right.
Yeah, yeah, we could, do we have the raw data? We could probably actually attribute it to something. That'd be embarrassing.
What's anonymous? It's survey.
Did anyone put their names on?
Yeah, I don't think we didn't, but I don't think we had the name follow. the
No.
quote. We just have all the statements for a particular question in one place.
But you do have that.
Somebody could go through and dig it out if they wanted.
It's just fake data.
Yeah.
Then you probably need to get.
All right, so, I think that probably our group needs to come together. What we did was look at the data in the tables, typing up that. So I think, Brian, we are gonna ask you if you would integrate it, and maybe you could keep it the same color so we can see what you're doing, and then we'll change the color at the end. I mean, I think you could, cut.
Got it. I got you. So you know that was
That was a
originally in the
Yeah,
municipality, and now it's being integrated.
does that make, and then we'll look at it, see what, because then we can pull it out again. If we need it. I'm sure you can do that. Right? Okay. And I think.
Get to
probably-
undo
It's
everything
pretty
that Brian
straightforward.
does.
Okay, I think there needs to be some tightening in the narrative too in the fronts of things which we can look at, but we probably should.
Do you
Okay,
want to take control now, sir? I'll stop sharing.
no, I don't, I'm just.
Too late. Yes.
Okay. Then we had the implementation plan, and I can't connect, mine is just saying trying to connect. Oh, and maybe I didn't sign in. Anyway, so the implementation plan, and we just need to make sure that we have all, as a group, have consensus on this, because we're coming down pretty hard saying we think the city should reprioritize its budget and spend more money on climate. And they're gonna say to us, we don't have any money, and we're gonna say, everybody has money, and you have to decide where you're gonna spend it. But it's a pretty aggressive, strategy, I think.
Does it refer to Kenmore having prioritized?
We do have their, I believe, I'm talking to Matt up there, but he disappeared. I think we had in the appendix, the Kenmore letter, didn't we, that said they have two priorities, budget, climate and middle housing? I'll double check.
Doesn't look like it's there.
Do we say that though in the text? Or
Somewhere.
they're not gonna read through these.
No. No, there's, no.
I can,
You can
I was
put it in there.
gonna read through this and
Okay, yes,
do some
Great.
magic,
okay,
and so I'll turn and sure that that's in there. It wasn't there before.
okay. And then the so there's a little bit about that. So if there are concerns that we're moving in the wrong direction in terms of what we're saying, the implementation plan is, we should talk about that.
This is supposed to be some.
And then the next section in here is about what we think the Climate Action Committee is doing next. And really it moves towards, we think we can collaborate with the council and the community with, reducing emission, public education, create workshops and events in partnership with neighboring cities, write articles, Facebook, and continue. We think, when we talk about the role of the city government to provide leadership and the role of the community. That's interesting if we can get that tipping point in there again. We'd have to talk about that.
Yeah, it's somewhere.
No, I know that's the story of my life somewhere there. But we're not- Okay. Mhm. And then there is this, the Kenmore had this big chart on what individuals can do. It's in there somewhere, right here on my screen. And maybe we could do something like that. This seems pretty meager. What people can do. Turn off the lights and become a vegan, right?
Do we have a mascot?
Yeah, we don't want to invasive looking store. We want something different, like park.
Yeah. Well,
A what? Sitting?
so, yes, I don't think we should put the chart in here, but it was sort of that notion of,
Just Sam.
Salmon jumping over the tree.
yeah. Oh, there you go. Kokanee over the tree.
Is that?
Yeah, it's what. Oh, there we go. It's a coconut mascot.
Yeah, but it's a jumping over a tree. If they don't have trees in this. They just have to.
It just gets it. All right, so there's still a little bit more work to do.
It looks hugely different and improved.
Yes.
So thank you.
Matt, are you on here? Yes. Do you want to talk about the appendices?
You wanna share your screen and I'll get out of here?
I am gonna be honest. I have been trying to find time to go through the appendix, and it has been very
Yeah.
difficult the last couple weeks.
No problem. No, this is guilt-free zone. We'll just figure out. how to do it.
Also, I'd like to add that some of that work is mine. And I started at the other end of the document, and so I haven't got here yet, but making steady progress.
Great. Great. I think that the part of the problem is you really can't do until we're done. So, I mean, some of it you can't do until we're done. So, naming them, they're all named some X, Y, or Z or something. So,
We're getting there.
yeah, we're getting there. All right. So, what's your sense about what we have to do? What do we have to do next to get this to close?
I think we're really. No, I mean, I think the obvious thing is we need somebody to take this and polish
Okay.
it. Make it shiny, glossy, like Kenmore and Show.
Okay. Can you share the letter from Cascadia?
Yeah.
So I think there are two things on the table. One is Corey did follow up with Cascadia, And they've written back saying, we could do this, what do you want us to do? And that would be, but they didn't give us a price, so so if she can get that letter up there, we can see that. The other is a discussion about, that Tracy suggested maybe Heather Price might be available to do some editing. She's a. Is she? Have you talked with her at all about this, or was this in the good idea category?
No, I've talked with her about this, and she'd be very excited to do this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by editing? What?
Well, given that she has the scientific knowledge and that she has basically as part of a SORC standpoint, it's basically as a science, and I forget what the ERC stands for, but it's essentially a compendium of modules that the science teachers can use, and so she's an editor on that. So she's used to editing things that have to do with transmitting science knowledge from people who know it to people who don't know it.
So like polishing things and making figures or
I don't know.
glossy.
I don't know what the figures, but certainly basically editing our documents, basically read more smoothly, have a single voice kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
I mean, I can talk to her about the figures, but I was kind of under the impression that we got the figures we want, right? I mean, she might be able to suggest a few that we might put in there, but
Well, Brian had just said glossy and
well, I mean,
like Ken was.
yeah, like
There's this like.
where they
big
publish it on the
comic book.
web and it's readable to everyone.
right. That's what I was thinking, the sort of the graphic novel thing for that part, right?
Yeah.
Because that way, basically, we this sounds bad, but lose all pretense of actually trying to make it look like a report, right? But at the same time, making it in a very accessible, familiar format, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But tell me about, could you talk a little bit to everybody about the graphic novel?
Sure. So my thought was that, given that basically we know that very few people are actually going to sit down and read this report, I hope it's not the case, but realistically, yeah, okay. If we had a 6-page treatment of our major findings, like hiring the climate manager and things like that, with a mascot of some kind, I think that this is something that we could give out at Picnic in the Park or at Battle of the Bands, right? And people would actually read the thing. Their kids would actually read the thing, right? And it's sort of a think of it as sort of a progress report on what your CAC has been doing. Right? And so it's not going to make any for except for basically just very minimum figures that we need to support the arguments. It would basically be mostly conclusion, right? It would just be hitting point after point after point. So I figure 6 pages we can do. It's not too long that people won't read it. It's not too short that it would basically be a splash page, right? And so my thought was that if we could hire somebody who has some science background, but also is artistic, that would basically be great. And I was telling Sarah about, I'd reached out to a couple of students, one at Western Washington, one at Occidental College in California, who are environmental science majors with an art minor. And they have actually drawn manga, anime, and traditional graphic novel format before. So I'm trying to dangle this in front of them. And I think Corey's asking Phil about basically what the procedure for hiring somebody like this would be, since even if we hire a consultant to do the glossy thing, right, we're still gonna have to figure out how to pay them, right? So these are some of the details that we need to get into, but broadly speaking, what do you guys think?
Well, that's kind of your executive summary, then, right? Would it be an executive summary in a comic book?
Different, actually. 6 pages is kind of more than the executive summary, and this is designed as sort of maybe a trifold kind of thing where you hand it out to people. It stands by itself. It's not meant to introduce.
So isn't the executive summary like a summary of the whole
Well,
document?
yes, but I think what's intriguing about the graphic novel is format is that it's accessible.
Right,
I
I think so should be, I mean, do we need both an executive summary and a comic book?
Yes.
The comic book is the standalone thing, right? You're
Yeah.
handing it out to people and it's self-contained.
And so you can decide what you want in there, that could be different from the executive summary, that's how I would see it.
Right, and part of it is basically, it's said, you're gonna get conclusion after conclusion, so we don't have to. Say the stuff about we are seeing the effects of climate change, extreme weather, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we may just state that like in one sentence or something like that. But then the bulk of it, I kind of see as being, we need to reduce emissions within the city of Lake Forest Park, enhance Lake Forest Park ecosystem health and resilience and fairness, right? We hit those points hard in the latter half of the executive summary. So in that sense, it'd be different, right? Because we're not trying to make a scientific argument into a conclusion. We're just presenting conclusions and citing just enough stuff so that there is sort of a logical chain of thought.
I love that idea. I think that's really cool. I mean, as a parent of someone who only will only read graphic novels, I mean, I think that's awesome. I think that's like a great way to get like kids into it. And yeah, I love that idea.
Love the idea, can you give me a little bit more what this is gonna look like? So I've got like, figures running out, little bubbles coming out of their head, you're like, hey, we can need climate action plan. Oh, yeah. So what do we?
Yeah, I mean, no, and that's fair. I mean, it's kind of up to the artist. I'm not gonna basically give them too much direction unless you want to give them direction, which is great. But rather than making it a dialogue or whatever, right? I mean, it could just literally be panoramic scenes, scene after scene, right? And maybe the occasional graph thrown in just for the heck of it, to support an argument. But they would need to basically figure out what the thematic thing that ties the whole thing together is. And it could be the mascot. It could just basically be that it is basically one person just walking through this entire set of scenes, right? And noting different things, right? It could be a walk down Lion Creek, for instance, or something like that. So I wanted to give the artist as much background as possible, but not really shade them as to what we were looking for, unless you guys think it's an important thing that we basically adhere to one kind of thing.
I think we have to tell them our goals, what we want our audience to walk away with, but then give them the license to do the graphic part in whatever way they see fit. But we have to decide what the content should say.
Yeah, it's gotta be informative.
Right.
It's gotta be-
Yeah.
So then, okay, since you're with me this far, okay, I need something like an RFP. Then, in other words, basically, what do we tell the artist literally that we want? Okay, and beyond that, they have whatever artistic license they want to do to convey these points, but we need these points. So what would be these points?
So this seems to me like this is outreach, right?
Yes.
And it might be that what we want to do is work and finish the whole climate action plan first, get that to the council, and then take on this kind of thing as a climate action committee. Once we've moved out of the whole role of being,
Yeah, once you
we're writing this
plan,
thing.
be the next step.
I think having that outreach in all sorts of different ways. I mean, you could do it as a series of comic books, right, that come out, depending on how much.
Sure. And the only thing I'm paying attention to, also paying attention to, is when do these, and because it's probably gonna be a student, right? When do these guys have free time? So I was thinking winter break, spring break, right? Maybe the summer, who knows, right? Okay, but trying to time it so that, they can devote 40 hours. I mean, I got that figure because for me, it takes about 6 hours per Bristol board to do a page of a graphic novel. And that's because I'm kind of sloppy, okay? That's just pencils and lettering, okay? And then somebody else comes in and does the inks and the color and all that stuff, right? But I just do that part. It takes me about 6 hours. So 6 times 6 is 36, rather than 40, because some people are more careful than I am. That's good. Okay. So that's how I got the figure of about 40 hours, which is roughly, a break, right?
So when we talked about this before, about hiring somebody to do the graphics, there was a statement that they had to have some sort of license. The students are not gonna have any of that.
No, an intern would be different. So I'll have to,
What do you call
an
it?
intern.
Okay, you call it an intern, okay.
And then somebody
And they're,
will,
and they're creating original art, right?
Yes.
You don't need a license. Oh, I'm sorry, what kind?
No,
of-
I'm just talking about business.
Oh, business. Okay.
There's some artistic license.
Yes,
So it seems like the more focused we are on telling the student what it is, the more we're gonna,
No,
like a student that doesn't, yeah, I'm just gonna phrase what I'm trying to say, a student that doesn't live in the area here. It's fine to have outside people like that, but I think you wanna really focus them on what the point of this is. And that's where it might take us more time to pull together, what is it that we're gonna give it, what did you call it, our,
the request for proposals.
oh, yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a lot of work to show them the student
Yeah.
what we'd like to see presented.
especially if we're gonna pay them, it's a considerable amount of money, right?
$5,000.
Yeah, so we want it done in a way that is useful to us and not rushed into something.
Absolutely. And if it makes our executive summary stronger, that's all to the good. So I see these two processes kind of feeding on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to tell an outsider literally what it is that's not just basically about our climate action program plan, but what's unique about it for Lake Forest Park, right? And then basically going back and saying, well, did we actually say that in there? You know, that sort of thing. It's kind of a gut check, and I think it's all too good.
And Teresa, are we thinking about this coming thing, rather than doing an official climate action plan?
no,
No, the plan isn't done.
But I mean, we could, what I'm saying is we could basically kind of edit this up, the plan that we have, and then just say, this is the climate action plan, and then have the pamphlet. Or the copy.
Okay, so here's my take on the plan. Since our main recommendation is to hire a climate action plan manager, it better be good enough so that the manager can look at it and say, oh, I think I know what I need to do, right?
Yeah.
And not have to ask other staff a lot about, or even us about, well, what do you mean by, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I see that they are, what is the word, complementary as opposed to competing or even separate things. So, you know, the audience, as you say, is basically going to be different, right? The graphic novel format thing is going to be for the general public, including basically students at our schools. The plan is going to be for basically the staff. I mean, and very interested residents. So I think in that way, you know, as you were saying, outreach, we're trying to hit as many audiences as possible at the different levels they need to be in at.
I guess the reason why that question is important, because we probably get away with we don't need Cascadia, then we don't need that kind of obligation for our plan. We don't, that's not necessarily something we want.
Well, it does sound like they'd be interested in going through and editing it.
okay, would you put it back up again? This is, we're not done with this, but we're gonna look at this, what Cascadia sent us. They had,
So this is editing it for some particular,
yeah, you have to go to the top.
right?
So this is what their proposal back to us. And they had two questions about a brochure, I guess, a pamphlet, and then the document itself.
So you asked them about doing brochure, not
Sorry,
about
sorry,
doing the whole
Oh,
plan.
No, it's down at the bottom.
Okay.
So they do understand that, does this look like you made the evidence that we could have a plan and a brochure, or is this?
Yeah, so they would look at to refine it. So I have to email them back of like what you guys would like. What are the next steps? Maybe we don't do the brochure quite yet. We get the plan edited and
Yes,
approved, like.
that's what I think is first. We gotta get this puppy out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Then we
This
can,
comes in
once it's
out.
approved, then we can do the brochure next. I think it's.
So they're talking about graphics we create for the brochure to be used in the climate action, but really it should be the other way around.
Right.
Graphics that we have in the climate action plan and then pull those into the brochure.
So I'll kind of leave off the brochure and go back to just.
Telling focus on the thing that we're.
So basically, it's not gonna look a lot different than what it looks like right now. The
No.
plan, sorry.
Yes, that's right.
As long as we're all agreed on that, that's all, that's good.
And I
But it-
think that's okay. I don't think it has to be shiny. And so what would they do first? If they're not making shiny, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, like graphically shiny, not right, you know, they refine it, they go through, make sure that the voice is all one, and I think.
There's like
Yeah,
a photographer on staff, so you can imagine like there might be a photo in the background, or, you know, there's things that you can do. To make it
But
look like,
that's shiny in my mind. That's
Yeah.
what making it look different. But Corey's saying that we're not doing. that.
well, that's what
We're
they're
gonna
saying,
leave
that that's
like
like
the
their
small part of it, not the big brochure.
Yeah,
Oh, not
Yeah.
a brochure.
Yeah, we might convince them to redraft some of the graphs. Because some of the graphs are kind of clunky in the reports, so.
They might know, also know where better ones are,
Right.
right, because they've been doing
They've been
this
doing
in
this.
their sleep, so.
Yeah.
well, I love that idea, Tracy. Yeah, so but if we're gonna do this, though, maybe we should do the polishing of the plan first. And then once we have that, then we can
Yeah.
really be much more focused about how we then go about doing them.
Yeah, we can do all the fun stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, Sarah, you were gonna make a discussion about next year's timeline, perhaps. And one of the timeline points I'd like to put in there is something ready by summer to basically give to the general public. I mean, the plan may be perfectly ready and it may be perfectly presentable to the public, but again, no matter of the number of people who are gonna read it, right? So,
Yeah. Yes, and that's when we're sort of out in public too, so more like.
Is there a new timeline thing?
No,
But we do have the things to do in.
yes, we have some
section.
next steps. So let me see if I understand what I think we've said. And jump in if I don't have this right. But what we're saying is that we would like Corey to go back to Cascadia, get a budget for sharpening and highlighting our, what we have as a report now. They may come back to us and say that we need more work to do. Okay, and then, well, we get a budget for that. If it falls within the purview of the finances we have, can we just spend it?
Yeah, it will have to be under a certain contract amount for us to be able to go right away, otherwise we'll have to wait till. Something for the council.
Okay, and what is that number? And can we break it down into parts? So we reach the magic number.
We'll see how.
Okay, so we do that, we get the proposal back. And maybe as soon as you get it back, we could send it out to everybody so they see it and can we make decisions online? No,
No.
but you could tell me if you have any objections. Right,
We'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out, okay. And if it's reasonable, we would like to go ahead with that. The alternative is to talk about Heather Price as an alternative. Maybe we, okay, let me put that aside for a minute. And then the next step is that what we want to do is also in this process, when our document is finished, we want to create an accessible piece that tells the story in a different way than straight narrative. Is that what I heard? Okay, let me go back now and ask the question about Heather Price. Do we want to get a bid? Do we want to send the same thing to her and ask her if she's interested in it? Or do we?
I think we should just label this entire bit, whether it's Cascadia or Heather or whatever, let's call it external review, because it's the first time that somebody, not us, is looking at it, right? As far as I know.
Well, we had, what's it here?
Right, and Carrie looked at it, but she's kind of us, you know. So,
Is she? Can she be?
no, she's not arrested, but other than that, she's very familiar with what we do. So I want somebody who's just never seen this before, looking at it and saying, oh my goodness, you all forgot, you know, whatever.
So I don't think we're quite ready. I mean, 'cause we've all got assignments that
Yeah,
we're supposed to do.
So what's our
We
time?
need to do that.
Okay, so
So,
what's the
so
time?
let's do this. Can you do this tomorrow? Can you send it off to them tomorrow? And get
Yeah.
something back? And in the meantime, going to Seaside. So.
That's-
Okay,
Enjoy, everyone enjoy their holidays.
I think we have to, well.
The idea was to take it to the council in
Yeah.
January. Is that still the idea?
That's an idea.
So it's February.
Um, So, well, are y'all around between Christmas and New Year's? Can we do work between Christmas and New Year's?
Like, yeah, actually, this break is probably the best time for me to finish up, but
Okay. Well. Okay,
So can we get two bids then ahead of it? And give you the-
well, we're gonna need to send this out first, right?
Yeah, I don't know who Heather is, but Tracy and I can talk.
Yeah. Actually, and the one thing that you could ask Cascade is their timeline, how long will it take to basically? do something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Heather.
Yeah.
She's got a teaching schedule. Yeah, she does.
And also some others.
Yeah, and the climate justice. But she got rid of that. She's a busy girl, it's good.
do we need to set dates to meet again as subcommittees?
I think I'm not. I don't think our group does, I think I can self-pilot this.
Okay, are you gonna look at the narrative in front too?
And whenever I get done, I can send it to you.
Okay. Okay, we can meet.
And can I ask Matt and Ann, are you guys good with basically working on the appendix, or should we meet as a group?
I'm fine working directly with Matt and just plugging our way through it, if that's okay with Matt.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
It's
And-
easier for two of us to figure out how to get together than a larger group.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the next meeting. The next meeting,
What is that?
January something.
Yeah, for the first or something.
First Tuesday, right? First.
It'll be January 2nd.
Second, yeah,
The sixth,
We're all gonna be quiet.
second.
January
As long
second.
as it's not January 1st, we're all gonna come in here going, no.
You in the right year, Linda?
Yeah, February 2024.
January.
I'm sorry, June. No.
So we'll see. Okay. All right. That was great. We'll meet there. There are two other things that I just want, well, one other thing with two parts that I wanted to report on. And that was that, we've been, Mimi and Dana and I met with, council member elect Saunders. Just to talk about what we had done, because we could do anything we want, because she's just a citizen. Paula Good is interested in meeting, she's in Hawaii now and coming back on the 18th. And we can't have any more than 4 people, but is there anybody, when I get a date from her, who would like to join? And the second is I have also contacted Mayor-elect French about meeting, he's also interested, so we could just sort of, this is about the new people in new roles and previewing our plan.
When did they become not
January
elect?
1st.
Maybe at the January meeting, we can maybe approve a work plan for 24.
That'd be a miracle.
I think we can make a generic work
Okay,
plan. Yeah.
I'll make up a work. plan,
Yeah.
Right, that's good.
A work plan for the climate action.
Committee, yeah.
We can, don't we have enough work to do? No.
Say what it is.
Yeah.
You perform, right?
Yeah, I'll
Send me the-
review it, I
Okay, so is there anybody who's interested in meeting with Councilmember Good? Okay, anybody else?
I could do it, I just.
Okay. All right, I'll send out a note to you two for Brian and Linda. And how about anybody interested in meeting with Mayor-elect?
Probably not gonna be around, so.
Okay, I will send a note out after I get the dates and if the first, it'll be like, first 4 people can, I guess 3 people, because I'll be back. 3 people will just. meet with it. Okay. Yeah. Are you raising your hand? Oh,
I shouldn't be part of that discussion.
no.
Right.
I don't know, who made these rules?
Well,
Okay.
it's not anything.
Somebody.
They need to hear your voices on a way, but.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else that? Is there anything else we need to be talking about? Okay, I know many of you are coming to the Milwaukee Forest, and I want to show you the hat. This is the hat. Everybody gets this hat. Who comes? This is a Milwaukee Forest hat. So we're
Right.
looking forward to it.
Love it.
And then we're gonna have, Jeff is gonna take a drone picture of us all with our heads up. So it's gonna be fabulous. And
Jeff? This is wrong.
If we show up late, we forget that.
yeah,
They do that.
well, you have to do
Depends
something.
on how, like,
I got teach on Saturday. If there's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, like Saturday? What are you teaching on Saturday?
it's a file 160, so it's just
Oh, it's
a,
a lab or something?
it's a lab class.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. It's, we're hoping it doesn't rain on Saturday. It's for those of you on the farm, but actually planting
Good.
feet.
It is. Right.
Yeah, and the lawn, the area is big, huge, massive dirt now. They added amendments and compost, and it's gonna be easy to plant. Yes, so anyway, it'll be fun.
So if you make the second one with those staying in like first person, do you have an approximate cost that it would be to mass produce these things?
It costs $20,000 with this one.
And would it be cheaper for now? Going forward, or is that like the
No,
cost of
that-
what
that's-
goes in?
That's preparing the soil,
Okay.
buying 1,200 plants.
Things are only gonna get more expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have another business thing, if it's other business side.
Yes, it is.
All right. Okay, so, there's 2 people, residents of Mercer Island, who are developing a greenhouse gas inventory independent of the K4C greenhouse gas inventory. And I expressed to the council member there who's on the K4C outreach committee that you guys, kind of speaking on your behalf, but I kind of thought I was on safe ground here, would be interested in talking to those. Is that a reasonable thing for doing next year?
Sure.
Will they compare?
Put it in our work, it's the only thing in our work plan.
Okay,
Bring yours around, guys.
yeah, private citizens who just decided that they didn't like how K4C did things, so they wanted to basically they could do it on their own. Because I think we talked about this problem too, it doesn't drill deep enough into our community, right? It takes like countywide averages for a lot of things. And so they really wanted to make it specific for MIs, so they wanted to basically develop their own, and, you know, just like us, they have way too many talented people, so they decided to put their heads together and make this thing, and it's actually quite nice, so.
Is it different from significantly different from what the county came up with?
They're coming up with, their preliminary are very intriguing, yeah, but especially for transportation, so, yeah.
Because of the air.
Well, not just because of the air, but also even just tailpipe,
It's different.
yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what they don't include.
Exactly, so yeah, so I figured you guys might have some good questions for them, so, and especially since, you know, we're trying to make a report card for our own progress, right? It might be great to see how other people are handling it.
Yeah, so that would be really nice to get the different ways, like we were talking earlier, that things are accounted for. So that we can compare, say, the consumption model with whatever model we're using, that. Let's see.
Okay, yeah, put that on our, can we put that as part of our meeting?
Yeah.
Invite them to one of our meetings, absolutely.
The similar idea is that I'm not sure why Cascadia, whatever their full name is the only company out there that everyone's using to write the contract.
Yeah, and
I'm like, it seems like somebody else out there should be doing it, you know, cause it would be different, we don't all need it. Anyway, I was just like, I keep wondering why that's the only company. Or that would keep,
Is it anyone you know?
They use-
They use that media?
yeah, when they said that, I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Don't they have their own?
Unless there are names that are very similar in terms of company names, so
I might suggest that, you know, this might not be a terrible thing for you to look into as possibly a business. I mean, you know as much as they do, so.
Well, it seems like if everybody's using Cascadia, maybe we should.
what is the alternative? That's what I'm like. I keep
Well, we're
wondering,
putting
but-
together our own little, like, maybe we don't want them to smooth all of our stuff into what's already out there. I mean, you could see who could have bid in for Kenmore Shoreline and see if there are other companies out there that are bidding on this work.
What is it? Are they an environmental consulting group? Is that their bid?
That is their thing, yes.
So, what? Yeah, she's not here today. Other.
Oh, Jessica.
She has, she's
got an engineering.
Right, it's
So,
great.
but she kind of knows about.
She has stormwater, I think.
I just did a quick Google search. There is ecological consulting for Western Washington Group. Accenture, sustainability services and consulting.
That they work on climate action plans.
I don't know if they work on climate action plan, but they're consulting groups, just like Cascadia.
I'm guessing that a lot of these bigger firms are starting to develop their own groups within them that do climate. Because, you know, just given the amount of money that's in the system right now. So.
It's a woman-owned business, too. That's fine.
Cascadia.
Yeah.
Is that changing?
Oh, no, it's better in my opinion, but no, it's like affirmative action among equally qualified candidates. A woman-owned business.
I think they're doing quite well. I'm not worried about
It had one more item.
Oh, good.
Yeah, this is not an action item or anything, but I think you all saw it, but the NCA 5, that is the National Climate Assessment 5th version of it. They're having this great series of talks on very specific parts of the report. So the past two have been really broad, you know, this is the overview, right? But there's like one on if you want to know about airlines, if you want to know about the effects of the Pacific Northwest. And so the link that I sent to you will take you to the page that has all of the different talks. There's like about 20 of them or something like that. It's an enormous number. I'm not going to go to all of them because I just don't have the time, but they will also, but once you sign up for one, you'll have access to the archive of all of the talks, which are recorded. So that's one of the reasons why you might just want to get on their mailing list. Yeah, the overview folks were just brilliant at what they were presenting. So they had really nice papers.
who's doing these.
It's actually the the White House. Ultimately,
Okay.
but basically it's the National Climate Assessment Board.
Okay, so they're doing it.
It's a cascade.
Wait, did you send that as an email?
Yeah, I think I did.
I didn't get it.
Or
I didn't
did I?
get it.
Because I remember I didn't do that.
You might have sent it to Sarah and I.
Oh, okay.
I'll forward it.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure what I did. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the same group that did that talk down at the town hall.
Yeah.
With the urbanized.
Yeah, but it's a huge group, right? It's like 200 people or something. It's just an enormous number of leaders.
Yeah, I've got a recording of that.
Yeah.
Good talking.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
When are we gonna have our end of the year party?
Well, I was just thinking that, maybe it should be at my house. I'll send out an invitation between Christmas and New Year's.
Do that and,
You can't talk business, but you can come and have a beer.
Sounds perfect.
And the public, I guess, is invited.
Watch out.
Yeah,
What's there?
let's see, I'm
Don't
looking.
give them
All
the
the high school are gonna be showing up at your parties.
Yeah.
That's right.
Here.
So how about the Friday, the 29th? We'll figure out what it is.
That's good.
Is that better? Is that good?
Friday the 29th.
And anybody you want to bring with you is welcome. And we'll figure out what it is.
You have an idea what time?
No, I have just put it on the calendar, you know, what works for you.
Probably earlier rather than later.
Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah, what is our?
I mean, 5 minutes. Something like that. Oh my gosh, Tracy, is that bad? You teach until like, no, you're not teaching that day.
Not that, that's the 29th of December.
Yeah,
So why do you want to start so early? Why do you?
so then we can go later.
Oh, I thought you had other engagements.
No, I mean, you guys are probably much more entertaining with it up.
Well, then we need to do it like a potluck. We're gonna make it potluck, or do you wanna do it as an after dinner? Or not?
Do you wanna come, wanna have a potluck? No, eat and drink? That'd be easier for me.
Yeah.
Then I don't have to clean the house.
Yeah, don't
That's
clean
the
your
hard part.
I
No, I've taken all the, I'm also going to see some planting this, and I'm taking all my furniture out of the living room so I can get the floor shut.
Oh, you got it.
Hardly. Oh, yeah, I want to pick your brain on that.
Then I'm in town. But my kids are moving too. My furniture.
So they
what
use
time
furniture.
is it? Well, we haven't figured that out yet. If it's a potluck, why don't we go to 6 o'clock? Right. Great.
And then you guys should bring your guitars and sing some kind of climate song.
No, we can't do business.
But that's not.
That's business.
Amen.
It's 7 dollars.
Yeah, we could sing the salmon, yeah.
Yeah, you guys should write a new song.
All right, that was good. Anything else? Okay. Meeting adjourned.